So with our first question, just easy little icebreaker, please introduce yourself, your role, and your background.
My name is Kyna Willis. I am a public relations and campaigns manager with the American College of Rheumatology. My background is everything PR. I've worked in various sectors from non-for-profit, publicity, celebrity publicity, everything, multicultural beauty, and I was an adjunct professor, so I'm very passionate about giving that to up and coming PR professionals.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Blatt. I am the Senior Communications Manager at a company called Arcadis, which is a engineering and architecture firm with offices in about 30 countries. And we have a presence in a lot of different areas, but one of the biggest is transportation. And in that space, we do a number of communications related things, everything from event management, obviously, public and stakeholder engagement, communications plans, we write press releases, and we do all this on behalf of our clients. So that roster of clients includes like the Georgia Department of Transportation, Florida Department of Transportation, MARTA, Cobb County DOT, Atlanta DOT. So we're kind of in that space, and as a communications team, we serve basically as an extension of the communication teams at those agencies.
Thank you guys so much for being here with us. We're so excited. Okay, so then jumping into the next question, what has your journey to event planning and PR in general looked like?
Oh, it's been varied. So as I mentioned, I started out, so my first career was in celebrity public relations. And so I worked for an organization, it's Indiana Black Expo. And so it's similar to, if you all heard of like the Essence Music Festival. So it was, it's been around for about 40+ years. And so I handle all of the media relations for all of our celebrities that were coming into town. So I met Destiny's Child before they were really big, you know, so handling like media relations for all of that. So having to do everything from, this is back in the day when we had to actually take press kits to the newspaper, to the news stations. So I'm kind of aging myself. From there, I decided I wanted to go back to college. I didn't want to be an adult. I didn't want to pay bills. And so I went back. I was a graduate assistant for the American Society of Newspaper Editors, and I taught some PR classes. And so did that for a year and a half. From there, I did some agency work. Worked in not-for-profit for a while. And so I worked for the headquarters for Goodwill Industries of Central Indiana. Basically, our team was set up like an agency, and I managed all of the retail. So, you know, retail part of Goodwill is very visible. So I had to manage over 100 stores, all of the promotion regarding that. They realized that I loved events. And so they allowed me to be our senior event manager, and where I planned all of our corporate events, our corporate fundraisers, and an international event called Delegate Assembly, which comes to each Goodwill agency every 10 to 15 years. And so our Goodwill, based on size and revenue, was ranked the #2 Goodwill in the country. And so I was able to share some of the knowledge that we were implementing in our Goodwills to other Goodwills across the country. So that was really exciting. From there, I was a senior PR account manager for McDonald's. And so that was just a dream. Well, I thought it was a dream job. It wasn't McDonald's. I worked for an agency, but I represented, my account was McDonald's. So loved the work. The culture of the agency didn't quite fit well with, you know, the way that I like to work. And so I left there and I became an entrepreneur for 13 years. And full-time entrepreneurship. I had campaigns for BET, and this was all without a business plan. Like, I don't recommend it. It was just, I fell into entrepreneurship. I did not want to do it. You know, I kept saying like, I want to get a job. I want to get a job. And people are saying, well, you have a job, you know, like you get up every day, you're, you know, attracting these clients. And so anything from, and I'm from Indiana. So I've just been here for the last, since 2017. And so a lot of my clients were Indiana-based clients, but the energy company there, some beauty brands that were up and coming, but I landed them on the Today Show. And so just being able to, you know, really get a understanding of entrepreneurship and taking my knowledge that I learned from the agency as well as from Goodwill and just really applying it to like being an entrepreneur. I also manage gospel artists for the oldest gospel label in the US, which is Ty Scott Records. So a lot of your gospel artists like Kirk Franklin and, you know, the Clark sisters, they all came through this record label. And so I got to manage that, went to all of the award shows. So there's an award show called the Stellar Awards, and it's kind of like the Grammys for, is that the Grammys? That's the music award show. So the Stellars is like the Grammys for gospel and Christian artists. And so had the opportunity to go there and manage some events there and activations for some of the clients. From there, I decided I just wanted to move it from Indianapolis. I've been there for 17 years, had made, you know, had roots there and decided that I wanted a change. And, you know, I just felt like I had outgrown Indianapolis, actually. And so moved to Atlanta. I started doing some business, here in the Georgia area, and I decided to just up and move. And, I started more businesses. So I opened I love activations. Like I loved working with the multicultural beauty. So I'm very passionate about helping smaller brands that are that have diverse consumer markets. And so because that was a lot of the work that I did for McDonald's. I worked with the ethnic consumer groups, so the African American consumer market, Asian consumer market, and Hispanic consumer market. And so I just channel all of that into the type of clients that I really wanted to attract. And for about 4 years, I worked with a multicultural beauty brand. It's the first Hispanic-owned beauty brand that we got them in Target. It's Honey Baby Naturals. And so love to really enjoy that retail integration that we were able to do and just really grow that brand, like the different campaigns and a lot of direct-to-consumer events with the different trade shows, doing a lot of influencer relations before that was even a really big thing. And so I started another company where I own photo booths. And so because I loved events, so I was like, well, you know, I can just utilize these photo booths and these photo activations to help grow different brands, businesses. That didn't go as planned. It didn't, the revenue that I received from doing just PR didn't necessarily generate to the same revenue as having the events, having the photo activations. And so I was like, I'm gonna go back to PR. And so I landed and it was just a year break that I took from just doing PR. And so I landed a contract with the American College of Rheumatology to plan their national public awareness campaign where we have Venus Williams as the spokesperson. And so I worked with them for 2 years as a contractor, and then they created a position for me. So I came on full-time a couple of years ago. And so I've been doing that, and I still do smallish type of contracts, mainly events. So yeah, so that was a lot, but
That
yeah.
was awesome. Thank you so
So
much.
just very diverse and varied, so.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. I love that.
It was a lot. I was trying to
That's all-
think,
that's fantastic.
I was trying to think like, okay, I did this, I did that, and I still forget things, but yeah. So
Yeah, that's fantastic. So my career was a little different. I actually started as a journalist. So I graduated from the University of Florida many years ago and got into journalism. I was a copy editor, became a designer, became a team leader of designers, became a photo editor, and then I became a reporter. All that in the span of about 16 years. I worked for 4 different newspapers, 1 in Virginia, 2 in Florida, and then I came to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 2005 and was there, did a lot of reporting on everything from, you know, government malfeasance to kids with cancer to all kinds of different types of stories. But as many of you probably are aware, newspapers haven't done well or that well over the past 10 or so years. And in 2012, my entire department was laid off. So I was kind of left with decision to make, what did I want to do? What was going to be my chapter 2, right? Chapter 1 was written, what was going to be my chapter 2? And so I went back and got an MBA, which is the thing you do when you don't know what you're going to do. Thought I was going to go into marketing. Then I thought I was going to go into advertising, did a lot of work in the MBA space in that, just learning about it, growing into it, and then realized, after I got my MBA that, what, I wanted to work in PR. So I landed a job at Hartsfield-Jackson, and I was the assistant PR manager. Within 6 months, my boss quit. He was the senior PR manager, and they tapped me to be his successor, which was fantastic, except I had no experience in the things that he did, which included internal communications and speech writing. But of course, they said, well, you're a former reporter, and you can do both internal communications and speech writing. So I did both of those things, basically learned on the job, became an event manager of sorts because I managed the general manager's calendar, right? So I wrote speeches on his behalf, but I also accompanied him on every event, that he had. So whether it was inside the airport or was with the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce or with Lockheed Martin, I was there to basically say, okay, the GM is coming. We need all of these things. So from there, I left Hartsfield-Jackson in 2018 and went into the consulting space. And this was the same space I'm in now, kind of the transportation consulting space where I do communications work on behalf of the clients. And a lot of that work just happens to deal with event planning and public engagement. I mean, we are so heavy in this space because, as you can imagine, a lot of the projects that Georgia DOT does or Florida DOT or any of these clients, all of these are massive, large-scale projects that require public engagement, right? You can't build an express lane on 285 without going to the public and asking, hey, guys, we're going to do this, and we're probably going to take some land, and it might be your land. So all of that is part of that process. So I am heavily engaged in that. So our clients being Georgia DOT, we represent them, we go out to the public, and we put on these events, whether they're virtual events or in-person events, and we basically collect feedback, we give them information, and then we incorporate that into the plan itself. So that's kind of a synopsis.
I love that diverse backgrounds. I love that freeway or expressway. Okay, so next up, is there anything you wish you knew before becoming a PR professional?
I wish, maybe, understanding that just how diverse the profession is. I went to school thinking that I would be, I wanted to do international relations. Like, I loved languages. I took I went to a school that was from 6th through 12th grade. It was a performing arts school. And so like half of the day, it was seriously fun. Like, we danced, sang, all that through the halls. And so I went to the same school from 6th through 12th grade. I took all of the French I could take. So I was like, I want to do something with French and, or foreign languages. So I went to school and I told the advisor I wanted to do international relations. They said, there's no such thing. They told me this, but this was back in 95. So back in 95, they said it wasn't such a thing as international relations. Were you all born then? No? Okay. So they said there's no such thing as international relations. So I just went to English because I was like, well, this is, I'll just do English, but I knew that I was not going to stay there. I went to see a speaker, a PR professional, Terry Williams, with the Terry Williams Agency. She spoke at our university and she was the publicist for Janet Jackson, Eddie Murphy, Quincy Jones. I said, that is what I will do. I went the very next day and I changed my career. I changed my major. And, but I was so hyper focused on, okay, I'm gonna do the media relations part, or I may get into what we're calling branding now, but what we learned it was graphics, you know. It was heavy, of course, on, we had to, the prerequisites were the journalism classes, and so we had to learn we had to know how to write. So there was no connection at my university between public relations and event management. And so had I known like PR isn't like this one linear path to, you know, PR, I think I would have done other things as far as like the types of internships, the types of jobs that I looked for as I was coming out of school. So I got introduced to public relations because someone was a celebrity publicist, right? That's what attracted me to the profession. And so I went to the library, I went and got her book. I kept that book through my entire college career. I kept checking that book out. I was like, nobody else, because I couldn't afford it. So I kept checking this book out and would just study it and read it and read it. And that is the first job, the type of job that I landed. And so, but then I realized the older I got, I realized I didn't really like that. Dealing with celebrities and athletes, it's a lot of energy. You know, you have to be on call. You have to, just thinking about the crisis communication. And that's just something that, you know, I didn't desire to do that anymore. You know, I wish I had looked at, okay, maybe like doing something in finance, or even looking at healthcare, where I ended up landing, you know, later on in my career. But because I saw one thing and they didn't really share like how dynamic public relations was. And I don't even know if they knew at the time, you know, because the landscape of PR has changed so much. You know, we didn't have social media as a part of how we learned public relations. And so I think if I had just known, or if the resources were available, on how vast, you know, the profession could be, you know, I probably would have done some things differently. So, yeah.
It's a very diverse
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Absolutely, all of that. I agree with all of that. I think, you know, public relations has really expanded. I mean, it is so all encompassing. So when I think of PR, I mean, I think of an amalgamation of so many different things, you know, whether it's event planning, it's strategy, it's internal communications, it's executive speech writing. It is so vast and so big that in a lot of ways you are wearing multiple hats, and you also have to have expertise in multiple things. It's not just you're a great writer, you're going to be great at PR because you're a great writer. You need to be a great writer, and you also need to perhaps know how to shoot video. Perhaps you need to be a great writer and you need to know how to edit, or you need to know how to conduct an event. You need to know how to write a communications plan. You need to lay out objectives that are smart objectives, not just goals that have, you know, no real meaning. And so, you know, for me, I think, you know, all of that is to say, I think PR is and will continue to be something that you will constantly learn, and it will constantly evolve. And I think that's the exciting part of it, is that it's going to change. And I think it's going to change for the better and to your advantage, because I think as you kind of grow into your profession, you're going to find, you know, all of these skill sets that you learn along the way, and if you continue to grow and continue to learn, it's just going to make you that much better.
No, I think that's
And to that point, understanding also that what you learn in a classroom, or even what you learn at how they do PR at one organization, may not necessarily how PR is done at another organization. And it may not even be called public relations. It may be, the department that I'm in is called Marcom. And it's heavy on the marketing side, which is not traditional marketing. It's more like graphic design. So it's like so many different names. And even, I mean, if you have the fundamental skills, you will be able to, you know, succeed. You just have to be flexible. But they may have different types of standards and how they want the PR to be done or the writing style to be done. It may not necessarily be AP style, it may be another style. And so just being able to be flexible and understanding like it's just this and that. It's not a either or type of situation, so.
Definitely. I think those of us who went on the MSL tour can definitely agree. There are many different options when it comes to PR. Okay, let's get more into a little bit of event planning. What does the event planning process look like for you? Is there a standard model that you follow?
I may be a untraditional event planner. So even though I taught event management as an adjunct professor, and I brought my book that you see is all torn up. So when I said I have this book, I pulled it out. This is what I taught my students from. And I don't know if this is like a standard model, but understanding like what the concept is, approaching it a lot like you approach a public relations campaign. So from conceptualization, so understanding like the goals and objectives of your event, down to like is this a event for fundraising or this is just a party, and this is so interesting because I just talked to a client yesterday and I'm like, okay, going through this whole process with her, because it's so second nature for me that when I looked at this question, I was like, I really have to like think about each single process, but finding out the budget, and you will find out a lot of people, they're like, I don't have a budget. You have a budget, there's some type of budget there. Staffing. So, identifying, is there a committee? What type of resources do you have? Or does your client have any resources? If this is an in-house type of event, what other committees can be formed within the organization to help help implement the event? Let's see. Or understanding like what the programming is. So understanding like your content and programming for your event. Once you've nailed down like, what this event is, what's the objective of the event, and jump in at any time. I'm just and so then once you get your programming, then how are you going to market it? So even though you have this huge event plan, you also will have your work plans or different plans within the larger plan. So you may have a work plan for your committees, for your staff, and you may have a work plan for the PR and the marketing of it. You also definitely want to have that budget. I mentioned budget, and then during the actual event, the execution, like who's on registration, who's on, these particular sessions that you may have. And from there, of course, you don't want to forget, the post event. A lot of people forget that part of event planning. And you always want to go back to those objectives, like, so if you all don't take anything else away from this, this discussion, please listen to me when I say regarding if it's an event, if it's a public relations campaign, make sure that you have a objective in mind, because that is what will help you measure if your objective, if your event or if your campaign was successful. You always want to go back to, as he mentioned, those SMART objectives, is it measurable? Is it specific? Making sure that, at the end of your event, at the end of your campaign, you can go back and say in a post event or post campaign report, okay, we met this particular goal. We were able to attract, 2,000 people during this event, or, the registration goal was met. So you want to make sure that if you're working at an organization and they say that they do not have objectives, the onus is on you as public relations professionals to make sure that an objective is formed and have agreement and alignment with your supervisor to make sure at the end you can come back and say, well, this objective was met, or these are areas for improvement because we missed the mark. I have nothing else.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that was perfect. So I like to think of event planning as part of the larger communications plan, right? So, thinking about it holistically, it is, it's a part of the whole thing. You have a communications plan, and if you are going to have events as part of communication strategy, it needs to have, like you said, it needs to have the goals and objectives. It needs to think about the audience. Who are you targeting? What are their specific needs? You might be having an event for elderly people. That might look different than an event for people who speak languages other than English, right? Thinking about strategies and tactics. So what does that event look like? Is it in person? Is it virtual? If it's in person, what do you need at the event? Do you need lecterns? Does it need to accommodate 150 people? It likely needs to be ADA compliant. It needs to have parking. So all these things you're thinking about. And then I like to think of, in addition to kind of the larger umbrella items that are, big picture, is coming up with an activity tracker. I am really a firm believer in tracking everything that you're doing ahead of that event. So everyone knows what we're doing, who's responsible for doing that what, and when it's due, right? So that ahead of the event, you're basically checking things off. And then the day of the event, of course, is early setup. You've done kind of all of your pre-planning. You do that setup, you host the event, you prepare for, some of the things that, and as much as you can prepare for it, some of the things that may not go your way. For instance, your event may attract media attention. So kind of knowing the staffing plan ahead of time, knowing who's going to be that person. And typically it's, someone with that background in media relations who's going to field questions in circumstances in which your event may turn controversial. Your event may have people there who are not happy about something. And this is in a lot of cases in which you do have, if it is a transportation project, for instance, and people are coming there and they want to know about construction noise, or they want to know about, accessibility issues or safety issues. They may not be happy. And so thinking about it in terms of, okay, what do we need to do? Thinking ahead of time in terms of staffing so that we can make sure that we address those things.
Awesome, thank you guys so much. Okay, which event that you have planned or contributed to has been your favorite?
I think my favorite would have to be the March of Dimes National Summit, which I planned just 2 years ago. And I think it's because of where I am in my life now. It was the purpose of the event was to bring awareness. It has a very strong advocacy focus to the event. And so it's to bring awareness to maternal health, maternal fatalities, yes. And so it was, just the content, and I was not involved in creating the content, but I was involved in pulling everything together as the event planner. The activations, the fact that we were able to incorporate an arts component, because I told you all that, I said that I went to performing arts school, but I'm a former dancer, so trained ballet, modern jazz tap. So being able to incorporate my loves together, so I love the performing arts and I love event planning. So being able to put that all together it just touched me differently. And being able to plan an event that was for a purpose. I think I just came across a statistic that Georgia is maybe like the 8th state in leading in maternal fatalities. And so it's just, just to see the different lawmakers and community activists come together for such an amazing purpose. It was like, I cry every day. It had me in tears. Like I said, the dance performances, the speakers, everything was just very intentional, and just even the centerpieces, we created floral pieces, but they were made out of almost like if you can think of like a very upscale, like baby shower. So this was at a corporate, conference. So they were made out of like the onesies and things like that, but there were flowers in it, and then they were donated to mothers who were in need. So everything was done with so much intention that I was just like, this is hands down my favorite, and it was not that this was the largest contract that I had, but it was something that touched me because I know people who have, who have been victim to this, and I'm sure you all like love Beyonce, but you hear about her story and, her pregnancy and things like that. And so it just touched me, different. So I loved it, and I will definitely work with them again. They were easy to work with, and they really took my expertise seriously. So yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So I think mine, how many of you are familiar with State Route 316? It's like the east-west transportation artery that runs from like Gwinnett County to the University of Georgia. Any of you ever traveled that route? Well, if you traveled it lately, oh, you've never, okay. Well, if you travel it, it is a very construction-laden kind of artery right now. There are probably more than 24 projects going on right now or in the planning stages. We're basically converting it from kind of a traditional 4-lane street with lights and stop signs and whatnot into a highway. So ramps and interchanges and, all that stuff. So it's a big deal. It's been going on for years. And these are all individual projects that are going on somewhat simultaneously. Well, as that is happening, there's also something called the State Route 316 planning study, which I'm a part of. And that planning study is basically looking at this entire 40 miles and looking at all the projects and saying, okay, these are all well and good, but what else, what additional improvements need to be had as part of this? So we've conducted, in addition to all of this, the engineering modeling and looking at, different things that we can think of to improve operations, to improve safety, to improve all these things. We, of course, have done a number of stakeholder and public engagement meetings. And the reason I like it so much is because, number one, we traditionally get, 30, 60 people at some of these events. It can be kind of a lively affair. We had over 150 at 3 different events. These were large-scale events. People weren't always happy, but they were engaged. And that part I love the most because, we were there, we were able to answer their questions, and we also had materials not only for them to take, but that we had surveys that they could provide their input. So it was successful in a number of ways, but in most was that they felt heard, or at least we felt they felt heard. And they really had an opportunity to express themselves through the survey, through all these different comment cards and things, and to be able to ask questions like of Georgia DOT, of various consultants. I mean, it really was successful in the sense that it really brought people out.
That sounds awesome. Good events. Okay, so going back to budgeting, what does the budgeting process look like for you during the event planning process?
So going back to, understanding the scope, so understanding the objectives, like I said, is this a fundraiser? Is this just kind of like, is this a party with a purpose, or is this just a party, and then, let's see, I think I wrote down some stuff. So identifying your list of potential vendors, so making sure that, and what I like to do, I like to have vendors who are, like I have different levels to the vendors, like my very high, that their fee is probably extremely, high. And then I have my mid-level and my, more affordable vendors, but quality all the same. But, so there are certain vendors, I like to just have them in different categories. And so understanding what type of vendor will meet the need of my client or for the organization. So identifying those vendors, obtaining estimates from them and different proposals. From there, once the budget, and then from those estimates, really laying out a budget for the organization or for the event. I've gotten pretty good that I can give a ballpark figure of, what I know what something costs, but I never tell a client because they'll try to, commit you to that price. And I'm like, no, like I mentioned, just yesterday, a client was asking me like, well, how much would this cost? I'm like, I can't really say that without you telling me what your needs are, and so also identifying as far as like your vendors, what are the necessity vendors and then what are the good to have vendors? Of course, you need a photographer. Depending on the event, you may not need a videographer, so if the budget is a little lean, you may have to just stick with either a photographer or a videographer and not both. For example, a photo booth is a nice to have, it's not a necessity. Depending on the event, you may need a caterer, and so, but sometimes a caterer is not a necessity. So based on like the scope of the event, you determine like what are your must-haves and what are your nice to have. From there, getting the budget approved, tracking the budget along the way. And so a lot of times my budget trackers, I'll have like what the projected cost is, with the actual, I have another column for what it actually costs because you're going along the event process, you may add on things. So what your initial proposal was may not be what the actual cost ended up being, and then like what that final cost is. And so just making sure, and it is on you as a event planner or PR professional to nudge your, your either your supervisor or your client to say, hey, this is the number. Are you okay with us going over this number? Because right now you're adding X, Y, and Z, we're going over the budget, And also always having that extra, the income so that you're like, okay, well, they may want to do something extra, they may right now say that they are not interested in having, let's say they don't, for linen, they're saying they don't want linen at all. But going through the process, they may decide, I want the premium linen, so making sure you have some cushion in your budget to cover things like that. And then just at the end of the event, providing like a recap on, like this is where we fared with the entire budget. So that is my process.
So I love the question because I think so often, the budget gets lost in the whole event planning thing. It's almost like this thing that no one talks about because for whatever reason, they perhaps think that it's all free. And nothing ever is, right? And so, we're talking, when it comes to the budget, it really is about trade-offs, right? So you've got perhaps a labor budget, because if you've got consultants speaking, or maybe you are hiring a speaker, that of course is going to eat into your budget. The cost of the venue, right? Not all venues are going to be for free. Some of them are going to run you $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. I mean, they could be expensive. Cost of materials, like she was saying, linens, foam board, easels. I mean, all of these things that you kind of think of, oh yeah, whether you're paying for them or you're renting them, it's factored into your budget. And then the cost of advertising, right? So we think of like the peso model, the paid and the earned and the shared and the owned. And we kind of think of the earned and the shared and the owned as things that, oh, this is the free part. Well, now someone's doing that, right? That's all factored into the labor part of it. And someone has to pitch those stories. And so if you're doing shared, are you going to do boosted posts, or is it just going to be an organic? And then on the paid side, I mean, you could be looking at everything from, postcards to yard signs to any number of paid materials. And so much of that we think is like, oh, postcards, expensive. We did a postcard run of like 21,000, and it was over $7,000 for postcards. And that took up more than 50% of the budget for that event. I mean, it's just like, and so when you talk to the clients about it and they set this budget, they just kind of shake their heads and you're just like, well, I don't understand. Like, we want all these things. Okay, well, what can we give up? And so it is one of those necessary things that, you got to talk about the budget because that's really going to affect what you can and can't do.
Awesome, that is awesome advice. Thank
And
you.
I would say have realistic conversations. And I didn't say this part, but I own a wedding consulting company too, so a lot of my event standpoint is from dealing with brides and, weddings, and so I get it so much, whereas they're like, I want the world, and then they don't realize that the world it comes with a pretty penny, with a price tag, and so in an event that can start off, and this is like one of the last events that I did last year. She said, oh, I want a very intimate wedding, 75 guests. Well, it ended up costing like $70,000 because she wanted everything, and I tried to take her to more affordable venues and she's like, no, I'm like, okay. And so when she initially, she told me that, oh, this is just gonna be, quick turnaround, within 5 months, can you get this done? 75 guests. And so I told her like, okay, ballpark, maybe about 30,000-40,000. And then as she started to grow and she X'd all of the more affordable venues. And so, she's having to talk to her fiance. And she's like, well, Kyna said, I said, well, this was based on this, like this was based on this initial conversation. So yeah, just being realistic and communicating with your client to say, hey, no, this can't be done with this budget amount. We need to increase the budget. I'm very honest about that.
Nice, thank you. So we're gonna skip to our last question real quick, and then we can circle back after the audience questions. What is the best piece of advice you can give an emerging PR professional?
I would say the flexibility. And even though a lot of PR professionals I know, we're very passionate, individuals. I think that comes along with the territory. But just being flexible, things will change, being able to anticipate needs, and being an active listener. Like listening is so important. Whether you're in the boardroom at an organization or, you're planning a wedding or, with any campaign, understanding their needs, listening to your client, understanding what they're not saying. So it's almost like you're having to be in a mind reader. So understanding what they're not saying and getting out of them, helping them think through the process because they're not thinking through all of the strategy. They just see A and they see the endpoint Z. They don't even understand all of the points to get to Z. And so as a public relations professional, it is our responsibility to help them put those pieces together and anticipate those needs. And so I think that would be that.
That's great.
The final advice.
Yeah, that's totally agree. I think, don't stop learning. It's just so, it just sounds so elementary, but honestly, we're in a world now where everything is just so, everything's changing, everything is evolving, everything is, AI, it is becoming more and more advanced. And so, find your passion, take classes on Coursera, I've been taking Muckrat classes, if you're familiar with those. There are so many different things that you can learn, and you don't need to stick to one superpower. One of my colleagues is a broadcast journalist, and her superpower was being on camera and being such a great speaker, and she parlayed that superpower into a position in coaching. And so you can do multiple things. You just don't have to stick to that one thing, because there will be a time in your career, and I'm a testament to that, in which you may have some great skills, but your organization may move in a different direction and you may face a layoff. But you can rely on other skills and you can parlay those skills into something else. So that would be my piece of advice.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Do we have any questions from the audience? Vivian?
Okay, so we spoke so much on budgeting. It's for both of you guys. So did you ever have an event that went over the budget and it was like 2 days or so before the event and you had to like fix it or something?
Almost every event goes over the budget.
Okay.
But it goes over the initial budget
Yeah.
and 2 days before the event, no, but at some point, I have had to stop clients to say, hey, like at that 2 week part, at that 2 week point, I'm like, okay, let's, kind of wrap things up. But really, at the end of the day, like it's their event and it's their budget,
Yeah.
but the best that I can do is provide counsel and, that constant communication. But yeah, a lot of events have gone over budget. But it's not like they've been surprised. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, surprise, like, no. And that's why it's so important to have that tracker, and each item is a line item and a dollar amount. So when I see that, they're saying that, okay, I want to go with this venue versus that venue, or I want to go with this premium linen versus the polyester linen. Okay, so initially we allocated, $10 per linen. Well, this is $30 per linen. Are you okay with that? And, are you okay with us pulling this from the contingency line item? So, yeah.
Andrea?
Oh, well, they have a tendency to go over budget. I try to I get as close to, an actual quote as possible, like I was saying earlier, just postcards, for instance. I mean, the price of postage and paper, all of that has gone up. So the price I may quote the client a month before may not be the price I quote this week. And so I kind of factor that in that, this is as of this date. The one thing I've noticed recently with my clients, though, is this they want the maximum flexibility with the venue. And so the venue, I have a venue now that I booked, it's about $500, not a bad price, but the issue is the client won't confirm the date. And I told the client, I said, once we hit that month mark, we're about 2 months out. Once we hit that month mark, and if we cancel, it's progressive, basically. So 3 weeks out, we're gonna get less money. 2 weeks out, if we cancel, we're gonna get even less. And if we're a week out and we cancel, we'll get no money back. And this is a public agency, right? Public agency doesn't want to lose $500. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I just want to remind you, this is public money. So, yeah, but yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm gonna ask a question. Normally I don't jump it. I'm the faculty advisor for the group, but when we're talking about budgets, this is good information for the group to know. Are there ways that they can help stretch their budget for events such as with in-kind donations or sponsorships? And do you have any best practices for that?
Well, for me, the work that I've done, I've been able to barter some, and I don't really work in sponsorships, but I've seen that done. But I don't touch sponsorships at all. That's not really my wheelhouse. But that is an option. But then also that is why I have those 3 different categories of vendors as well. Just so that I'm being able to pair them with a vendor that is within their budget. So that's kind of the route that I go.
I try to get venues for free. Where I can. That's kind of the first go-to. My second go-to is recycling materials like foam board and things of those nature. Sometimes you can make those things last quite a few rounds of public engagement meetings, depending on how beat up they are. Then in terms of like social media, I'll recommend just an organic campaign versus a paid campaign. I'll recommend maybe fewer printouts of fact sheets or frequently asked questions, things where I know we can kind of soften the blow of that budget a little bit. It's kind of working around the edges because the big ticket items and if they insist on the big ticket items, you're just like, okay, so we do what we can.
And that brings me, that makes me think about the, so the public awareness campaign that I manage for the American College of Rheumatology is, Rheumatic Disease Awareness Month, or as we call it, RDAM. And as I mentioned, in the past, we've had like Jenny Garth, Terry Bradshaw, Venus Williams, like as our spokespeople. And so during COVID, at the height of COVID, I guess, in 2020, we were not allowed to go out and film anymore. And so we had to scale back our budget quite a bit, you know. And we got very creative. We utilized voices of patients, and we did not send out a film crew. We basically showed them how to create their own videos. So we did like a tutorial with them via Zoom, which, you know, all of the Zoom stuff was new. But that was a way for us to cut back on the budget. But then ever since then, we've been able to like scale back the cost of the campaign. So, as you mentioned, like not doing as much as the, paid advertising on, the social ads or whatever. We used to do a huge collateral in the airport. We took that away because people weren't traveling, you know, and so just going around, cutting around edges like that. So I just thought about that when you said that. So yeah, the last RDAM campaign that I worked on in 2023, it was all digital, and it did very well as far as like the numbers, whereas I probably had like a $200,000 budget before. And this last year, which it was on biosimilars, I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but it was on biosimilars, not a very sexy campaign compared to having a celebrity. But it was, it performed extremely well, especially amongst the target audience, which are individuals who have rheumatic diseases. And with biosimilars, a launch of biosimilars being introduced to, the market I guess that was last July. So yeah, it performed extremely well, and it was on a skeleton budget. Like our budget was so itty bitty, but it performed well. So that goes to show, like, if you have really good content and programming, like it will still resonate with that target audience.